beloved chosen one. Listen to me now. You were never blind. From the moment you entered this world, you've carried a knowing, a piercing awareness that set you apart. You have always seen through what others called normal, when others were comfortable in systems, masks, and performances. You couldn't play along. Something inside you, something divine, refused to sleep. You are not here by mistake. Heaven has pressed pause on everything around you so that you can hear this now. This is not coincidence. This is divine intervention. Because even as a child, you saw things that others dismissed. You sensed when something was off. You felt the weight in rooms. Even when everyone else was smiling, your heart recoiled from lies, even when they were dressed in charm. The way you heard between the words, the way your spirit tightened around dishonesty, this was never ordinary. This was never human. This was heaven calling you early, and they tried to strip that from you. They told you that you were too sensitive, too suspicious, too deep, or too intense. They wanted to convince you to numb it, to shut it off, to blend in. But the Spirit of God would not let you, because you are chosen. You have been set apart for a truth so great it would burn the eyes of the blind. And though the world tried to bury it, you never lost your vision, you just stopped trusting it. But God is reactivating what they tried to kill. The illusion around you was never meant for you. You've always walked with eyes that see beyond this world, beyond the surface. This is why entertainment doesn't satisfy you. It's why casual conversations feel shallow. It's why you often stand in a crowd and feel utterly alone. You are not broken. You are not bitter. You are blessed with perception that unsettles the realms of darkness. God's chosen one. The truth is this: you were born to see. You were anointed to expose. You were never called to accept the lie. And every time you tried to ignore it, to just go along, something inside you screamed. That was your spirit rejecting the counterfeit. That was the anointing fighting for you. You are not just intuitive, you are spiritually awakened. The people around you couldn't see it, so they called you rebellious. They labeled your discernment as delusion. But understand this, they had to, because if they acknowledged your sight, they'd have to confront their own blindness. And most people would rather remain asleep than wake up to a world they can't control. But you, oh, you were built for truth. You were made for the light. You were never meant to live hidden in shadows. You see, the systems are false. You see that not every smiling face carries good intention. You see the distractions, the masks, the spiritual decay behind polished exteriors. And while others are comfortable, you are restless because you can't unknow what heaven has revealed. It was proclaimed in the second letter to Timothy, chapter 1, verse 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. That sound mind is what they tried to confuse. That fearless power is what they tried to silence. But it's alive in you now, roaring again. You see things that shake people. You sense truths that threaten the powers of darkness. That's why you've been isolated. That's why you've been misunderstood. But heaven says, no more. The same eyes that wept in silence will now be eyes that pierce through deception. This world is full of illusions, manufactured comfort, fake joy, artificial community, false religion, and you, God's chosen one, have been sent as a disruptor, a revealer, a clarifier, because you carry within you what others run from. Holy truth. Don't downplay your discernment. Don't silence your sensitivity. These are the weapons heaven gave you to unmask the schemes of the enemy. This isn't weakness, it's divine strength. And every spiritual attack you've endured was confirmation, not contradiction. The enemy doesn't waste fire on those who are no threat. You've seen through the stage play of this life because God has granted you sight beyond the curtain. And now, He is calling you to use that sight not just to survive, but to guide others out of deception. So, if this word finds you now, and you feel that holy stirring in your spirit, then hear this with everything you are. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're not broken. You are chosen. You are rising in vision, in clarity, in boldness, and no veil can hide from your anointing any longer. Like this message, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that their discernment is a gift, not a curse. And if this resonates deep in your bones, if your spirit is roaring back to life, then subscribe now. Stay connected. This isn't the end. It's the unlocking of everything heaven has been preparing you for. Comment 777 below if you know your sight is a divine assignment. The hidden layers have always been there, stacked one over another like curtains on a stage, concealing truth behind performance. But you, chosen one, were never fool. You've walked among the sleepwalkers, the actors, the spiritually sedated, and still, something within you stirred. You saw through the surface. Even when you didn't have the language to explain what you were sensing, it wasn't just a feeling. It was a signal, a pulse from the divine, vibrating beneath the illusions, calling you deeper, always deeper. From a young age, you could feel that what was presented didn't align with what your spirit knew to be true. Words said one thing, but the atmosphere said another. The smile in someone's face contradicted the tension in the room. The sermon sounded holy, but your spirit cringed. These were not accidents. You were seeing the layers behind the layer. God had planted within you a spirit of discernment that could not be numbed by false peace. That's why you often found yourself unsettled, even in places designed to feel safe. You were surrounded by people who had accepted the image of goodness instead of pursuing actual truth. They traded real freedom for imitation order. But something in you resisted that trade. Something in you ached for what was real. You saw that people prayed, but didn't believe, that they worshipped, but stayed chained, that they quoted scriptures, but had no fruit. You didn't want to judge, but your spirit couldn't agree. Because what others accepted as holy, your soul recognized as hollow. And so you became the outlier, the misfit, the too intense one, the one who asks too many questions, the one who always finds something wrong. But heaven saw something else, a watcher, a seer, a breaker of patterns. You have never been easily entertained. You've never been fully comfortable in circles of empty chatter. You've often found yourself stepping away from crowds, from noise, from the ordinary, because you were picking up frequencies that others ignored. You've been overwhelmed, not because you're weak, but because you're wired to feel beyond the flesh. You are tuned to the frequency of the spirit. This is why your soul grew restless in places others called home. You sensed what was off, even when everyone else praised it. You heard what was unsaid. You saw what was unfinished. You walked through doors that everyone celebrated and yet felt a deep disturbance. These were not emotional reactions. These were spiritual alerts. Because you were never built to sleep under illusion. You were designed to break it. And though this gift has often isolated you, it is the very thing that will elevate you. You were never meant to be the same as those who thrive in shallowness. You were never meant to be satisfied with half-truths. You were created to carry the weight of full revelation. Understand this. God did not awaken you so that you could fit back into the blindness. He did not open your eyes so you could shut them to make others comfortable. What you see matters. What you feel matters. That unease you carry in spiritually polluted environments, that's confirmation, not confusion. You've felt this even in churches, even among believers, because spiritual sleep isn't just in the world, it has crept into the sacred platforms built on charisma, not on consecration. Ministries that quote truth, but bow to culture. Prophets that speak what's popular, not what's holy. And you, with your eyes that cut through fog, were never meant to sit quietly under it. The Spirit of God gave you this sight so that you could cry out, so that you could call things what they are. Not in bitterness, not in arrogance, but in holy responsibility. You're not just a feeler, you're a discerner, a revealer, our spiritual gatekeeper. This is why your journey has felt heavier than most, because you've carried layers of insight that others were too afraid to even look at. While they lived in the visible, you bore the weight of the invisible. While they praised the obvious, you wrestled with the hidden but chosen one. Hear this, you are not alone. Heaven backs your clarity. Angels defend your vision. God Himself is sharpening the lens through which you see. It is written in the book of Isaiah, chapter 2, verse 29. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. And you have grown weary not because you're wrong, but because you're right. Not because you're lost, but because you've been carrying truth in a world addicted to lies. Hold fast. What you see will not destroy you. It will define you, and in due time, it will deliver others. They called it coincidence. You called it confirmation, because deep in your spirit, you knew something sacred was happening. Every pattern that repeated itself, every strange interruption, every moment when the timing felt too exact, that wasn't your imagination. That was divine strategy. Heaven has been leaving breadcrumbs for you, and your spirit has been catching them. Even when your mind couldn't explain, God's chosen one. Hear this now. You are not paranoid. You are not overthinking. You are not reaching. You are perceiving. The world has trained people to ignore the whispers of the Spirit. They call it overreacting. When you feel something shift in the atmosphere, they call it drama when you can't stay in toxic places. But your soul knows what your mouth hasn't always been able to say. You are seeing and sensing something real. There is a reason you've never been able to sit comfortably in dysfunction. Your spirit cries out for what is real. It resists artificial peace. It exposes manipulation. It interrupts deception. That isn't trauma, it's discernment. That isn't anxiety, it's activation. The truth is, the more you awaken, the less you can tolerate what you once excused. Things that used to slip past you now feel like fire. Rooms that once felt fine now feel heavy. People you once aligned with now feel off. And though you may not always have proof, your spirit screams, something here is not right. You feel it when someone is smiling, but their energy is dark. You feel it when the atmosphere is polished, but not pure. You feel it when a situation looks blessed, but it's not carrying the fragrance of holiness. These signals are not random. They are warnings. You are not just emotionally aware, you are spiritually alive. Scripture says in the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 17, "The Spirit of truth, the world cannot accept him, because it neither sees him nor knows him. But you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you." That's why you can sense the invisible, because the Spirit of truth is inside you. And when you walk into a lie, your entire being rejects it. That's not negativity. That's purity refusing to compromise. That's heaven's code pulsing through your blood. So you find yourself pausing, withdrawing, declining invitations, shifting circles, saying no without even needing a reason, because your spirit already discerned what your mouth doesn't need to explain. It makes you look deep. It makes you seem distant. But the truth is, you're in alignment. You're not resisting people. You're responding to heaven. And it's that same sensitivity that's going to lead you into divine encounters, supernatural protection, and destiny-defining decisions. The closer you walk with the Spirit, the louder the whisper becomes. You feel a stop in your chest, even when everything looks right. You feel a go when logic says, wait. And sometimes you'll obey without understanding, because obedience is not always about evidence. It's about alignment. Some of your biggest breakthroughs won't come from what you see with your eyes, but from what you discern in your spirit. Yes, this kind of discernment can be lonely. Most people need proof before they move. You move because you heard God. You withdraw because something unseen felt dangerous. You step forward even when you're afraid, because the whisper said, now. This is why the enemy has fought to confuse your mind. He knows your discernment is deadly to darkness. He knows that one whisper from God through you can destroy entire plans of deception. So the warfare intensifies, not to break you, but to distract you, to make you second-guess what you felt, to make you question your clarity. But I say it boldly, you are not crazy. You are called. You are not broken. You are awake. And now, right here, right now, you must acknowledge that your gift of sight is not a burden. It's your proof. It's the fingerprint of your divine assignment. Comment, I hear you. Not for me, but as a prophetic act. When you type those words, you're aligning your spirit with truth. You're reminding your soul, I am not blind. I was born to perceive. You've wondered if it was all in your head. But today, your spirit is waking up. Every time you listened and avoided disaster, that was confirmation. Every time you obeyed the whisper, that was faith in action. You see through the illusion, not because you're better, but because you're called. Don't turn away from it now. Walk in it. Listen when heaven whispers. You move. They called you crazy on purpose. They had to, because if they didn't discredit you, they would have had to confront what you saw. And what you saw terrified them. Your clarity disrupted their comfort. Your discernment pierced through their false stability. So they labeled you. They mocked you. They minimized your warnings and exaggerated your flaws, not because you were wrong, but because you were right. God's chosen one. You were never crazy. You were never unstable. What you were and what you are is spiritually awake in a world that prefers sleep. Your gift made them uncomfortable, so they tried to make you the problem. But heaven never called you broken. Heaven called you watchful. There were moments you spoke up, and the room shifted. Not because you were harsh, but because truth entered. You said what no one else was brave enough to say. You named what others tiptoed around. You discerned what people spent their lives trying to ignore, and that's why they laughed. That's why they labeled you the overthinker, the too spiritual, the troublemaker. Oh, but what they didn't realize is that your courage to speak was the mercy of God interrupting their deception. People don't always reject you because they hate you. Sometimes they reject you because your presence convicts them. You weren't being too much. You were carrying too much light for the darkness they had normalized. Even in your silence, they felt threatened. Because you didn't even need to say a word, your eyes alone held weight. Your spirit carried a presence that exposed everything false. You carried alignment in a room full of performance. You brought peace where there was chaos, and confrontation where there was compromise. That's why you were pushed away. That's why you were misunderstood. You were walking in an atmosphere that couldn't handle your frequency. And though it hurt, and still hurts, you must understand this truth. Your rejection was your protection. God allowed the separation. He allowed the mockery. He allowed the false labels. Because, had you stayed where you were tolerated, you would have never grown into who you were chosen to be. They weren't fighting you. They were fighting the glory inside you that disturbed their disguise. It was never about your tone, your delivery, or your vibes. It was about your truth. And truth is not neutral, it divides. It separates light from darkness. It draws lines in spiritual realms, not just human hearts. And you, chosen one, are a line drawer, a revealer, a truth bearer. That's why you've often walked alone. It's not because you're unlovable. It's because you're unblendable. You were never meant to blend in. You weren't created to fit. You're not just a feeler, you're a forerunner. You're not just an observer, you're a disturber. You're not just awake, you're a divine interrupter. That's why the enemy tried to convince you that your voice was dangerous, that your intuition was wrong, that your insight was broken. Because if he could make you distrust what God placed inside you, he could silence one of heaven's most powerful voices in the earth, yours. But the lies didn't stick. Not forever. The season of silence is breaking. The time of hiding is ending. And now the very thing they mocked in you is the very thing heaven is about to magnify. You were never sent to be popular. You were sent to be pure. You weren't called to maintain the system. You were chosen to expose it. And you never needed their permission to see what God already showed you. You never needed their agreement to walk in your anointing. Your validation comes from the throne, not from their comfort. It is written in the book of Psalms, chapter 34, verse 19. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. Liu, and that affliction you've endured, those seasons of being called crazy, difficult, unstable, that was part of your training. You were never crazy. You were carrying clarity in a fog-covered world. You are not here to be silenced anymore. Everything you saw was real. Every warning in your spirit was accurate. Every uncomfortable pause, every shift in the atmosphere, I don't know why, but something feels off. That was God sharpening your discernment. That was heaven preparing your voice. Let this be the truth that sinks into your soul. You were not wrong. They just weren't ready. But now is the season where what once made you too much will be what sets you apart. The truth you carry will be what heals the ones who once ridiculed you. And those who mocked you will come back looking for what you always carried: truth, light, and uncompromising clarity. You've been forged in rejection so you could carry revelation. And soon, they won't call you crazy. They'll call you chosen. Not everyone is meant to wake up. That truth used to break your heart. You wanted them to see it so badly. You wanted them to feel what you felt, that sharp crack in the spirit when deception is shattered. You tried to explain. You tried to guide. You cried. You prayed. But they stayed asleep. And eventually, you started to wonder, was it me? Did I go too far? No. Chosen one. It wasn't you. It was the assignment on your life that disturbed their slumber. Because some people weren't ready to be delivered from illusion. Some aren't ready to face what you were built to confront. The same light that wakes one person up will offend another. And you were called to shine anyway. You were marked for exposure, not just of others, but of the spirit realm itself. You weren't called to blend in with the spiritual crowd. You weren't built to float in lukewarm waters. You were designed for discernment, for war, for truth that cuts between soul and spirit. You've probably noticed it already when you speak. Something shifts. People grow quiet. Some grow uncomfortable. Others grow angry. Because the words that come out of your mouth aren't just opinion, they're confrontation. They carry weight. They carry glory. They carry fire. That's not ego. That's mantle. And here's what makes it even more divine. You never asked for it. You never wanted to be different. You just couldn't ignore what you felt. You couldn't unsee what you saw. And now you understand. That was the call pulling you out. It is written in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 34. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. You were given that sword, and not everyone will thank you for using it. You'll find that some people love the idea of spiritual awakening until it costs them their comfort. They want to talk about God, but not obey Him. They want favor, but not fire. They want blessings, but not breaking. And when you show up, carrying truth, it exposes their compromise. That's why some people disappeared when you got serious. That's why relationships shifted when you stepped out of deception. You thought it was personal, but it was prophetic. Light separates. Truth divides. Glory isolates. But don't let the pain of isolation convince you that something went wrong. This is part of the process. God removes so He can rebuild. E separate soi can elevate. The pruning feels like loss, but it's actually positioning. Now, you're standing in a moment where you must understand something sacred. Your clarity is a responsibility. You are not seeing for entertainment. You are seeing because God trusts you with truth. You are not discerning for drama. You are discerning for destiny. Because as hard as it is to accept, not everyone will wake up, but someone will. And they're waiting on your obedience. Someone is trapped right now in the same deception you were delivered from. Someone is drowning in a place you escaped. Someone is crying out in the night for clarity, and you carry it. You carry the answer you once searched for. So don't silence yourself. Don't shrink back. Don't waste time mourning the ones who refused to wake up. Stand in truth for the ones who still can. Let your life be a signal to the watchers, the seekers, the broken ones who are ready. Your voice matters more than ever. Yes, it takes courage. It takes boldness to stand against a world that rewards conformity, but you were never built for safety. You were built for the storm. And heaven does not place warriors in comfort, it places them in conflict. So if this message echoes in your bones, if you feel that confirmation burning in your spirit, then honor that fire. Like this message, not just to support it, but to let heaven know you're still listening. Share this word with someone who might be walking through the same awakening. You never know who's one truth away from freedom. And subscribe, because what God is revealing in this hour isn't just for a moment, it's for a movement. And your journey with this truth is just beginning. Not everyone is meant to wake up, but you did. And because you did, you'll be the one who carries light into places others are afraid to go. You'll speak what others only whisper. You'll stand where others bow. You'll lead when others hide. This isn't just awareness, it's anointing. It's not just insight, it's inheritance. You've been entrusted with a dangerous level of clarity. Don't waste it. Don't bury it. Don't apologize for it. What once made you feel out of place is the very thing that proves heaven placed you exactly where you're meant to be. You felt the shift. You may not have had the words for it, but your spirit did. Something began stirring in the depths of you, unshakable, undeniable, a pulling, a pressing, like a veil was being lifted layer by layer, and what used to feel tolerable now feels toxic. What used to seem normal now feels nauseating. What you once ignored, you now confront. That's not mood. That's movement. Heaven has been working behind the scenes, and now it's beginning to show. There's a reason your restlessness has increased, a reason your appetite for casual things has vanished. You've been feeling the tension between two realms because your sight has upgraded. And when God begins to sharpen your spiritual vision, everything fake becomes unbearable. You start sensing what others are blind to. The invisible becomes louder. The unseen starts interrupting your daily routine. You are not just evolving, you are being prepared. The shift isn't in your environment, it's in your assignment. You're not just growing older, you're stepping into spiritual authority. And the cost of that authority is separation. Elevation always begins with isolation. You've been feeling the solitude, the pressure, the cutting away of what once defined you. And that's exactly how God refines the ones He trusts with revelation. Because let's be honest, you haven't been able to settle. Even when life looked fine, your spirit stayed stirred. You couldn't fake it. You couldn't go back to pretending. And no matter how hard you tried to numb it, the call kept getting louder. That is confirmation. That is the shift. It's not your imagination. It's not just a season. It's a holy transition, a divine repositioning. You are being moved into alignment with heaven's timetable. You're seeing it in your friendships. God is highlighting misalignments you used to overlook. You're seeing it in your desires. Things that once satisfied now feel empty. You're seeing it in your thoughts. You're no longer drawn to surface-level noise. You crave silence, depth, and spirit. Why? Because heaven is preparing you to carry weight. You don't get this kind of shift by chance. You're not experiencing these spiritual tremors because of mood swings. You are being set apart. The Word of God declares in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 27, the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Everything shakeable in your life is being shaken, not to destroy you, but to reveal what's eternal in you. You are being trained in clarity, sharpened by solitude, forged in obedience. And when this is finished, you won't just walk in sight, you'll walk in authority. This is why you've been uncomfortable. This is why your routine is being disrupted. The Spirit of God is calling you into deeper dimensions. And surface-level living is no longer compatible with your calling. You can feel it in your bones. Something is changing. You are no longer figuring things out. You are being called out. God is silencing the noise so you can hear Him clearly. God is removing distractions so you can walk with precision. God is tightening your circle so you can walk with power. You're not falling apart. You're falling into purpose. And yes, it feels like you're losing. It feels like relationships are breaking. It feels like confusion is circling you, but that's only because heaven is transitioning you from being available to everyone to being assigned by God. You're not for everything. You're not for everyone. You're for the kingdom, chosen one. Your spiritual lens is no longer clouded. You're seeing people differently. You're feeling atmospheres differently. You're hearing words behind words. That's not by accident. That's not your imagination. That's the Spirit sharpening your discernment for the days ahead. The battles you've been sensing, that tension in your chest when something feels off, the heaviness in rooms that others laugh through, that's confirmation. That's your anointing, waking up. And now, you must respond. No more shrinking to keep others comfortable. No more pretending not to see. No more ignoring the pull. This is your activation season. And it doesn't begin with noise. It begins with agreement. If this message confirms what you've been quietly experiencing, if it speaks to the shift you've been silently carrying, then declare it right now. Comment 444 below. That number marks alignment, foundation, divine strategy. When you type it, you're not doing it for me, you're doing it for heaven. You're saying, I see the shift. I accept the assignment. Lend away. Because now, you no longer walk in assumption, you walk in clarity. You don't live by reaction, you live by revelation. You're not moved by emotions, you're anchored in purpose. This shift is not a phase. It's a summons, and you are answering it right now. Every room felt wrong for a reason. You've walked into places that looked harmless, even holy, but something inside you tightened. You sat through conversations that sounded friendly, but your spirit braced itself. You joined environments that others praised, but everything in you screamed, leave. And for a long time, you thought it was just you. Maybe you were too anxious. Maybe you just couldn't relax. Maybe you were overthinking again. But now you know better. It wasn't your anxiety. It was your anointing. What felt off wasn't imagined, it was discerned. The Spirit within you was speaking before your mind could even catch up. God was alerting you to spiritual contamination in the atmosphere, because where others saw smiles, you saw shadows. Where others felt peace, you felt pressure. And where others stayed, you quietly walked away. You've walked into churches and felt spiritual pride covered in polished words. You've walked into relationships and felt control behind kindness. You've walked into group settings and felt manipulation hiding in plain sight. The moment you entered, you sensed it. The weight, the tension, the unspoken truth buried beneath religious rituals or social polish. God's chosen one. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are tuned in. You were never meant to tolerate polluted atmospheres just to maintain connection. What others call overreacting is your spirit's radar locking onto something heaven never meant for you to agree with. You were born to detect the counterfeit. You were designed to disturb it. The reason you feel tension in certain places isn't because you're negative, it's because you're carrying something pure. And purity always clashes with pretense. Light will never feel comfortable in rooms built on shadows. And the truth inside you refuses to make peace with false peace. That's why God never let you get too comfortable. That's why you've had to leave places everyone else celebrated. That's why you've said no to opportunities that looked golden but felt wrong. God wasn't training your logic, He was training your sensitivity. Because when you walk in anointing, your soul becomes allergic to what others have learned to tolerate. You cannot sit in spiritual dissonance and stay healthy. You cannot stay where your spirit is suffocating and still expect to carry power. There were places you almost gave yourself to, rooms you almost rooted in, circles you almost committed to, but at the last moment, your spirit pulled you back. You couldn't explain it. You didn't have a dramatic reason, but the whisper said, no. And that no was heaven protecting your assignment. Some places were not evil, they were just not for you. Some environments weren't demonic, they were simply too small for what God placed inside you. And when your spirit detected that limitation, it rebelled, not out of arrogance, but out of design. You weren't built to shrink. It is written in the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 6, verse 17, "Therefore come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing, and I will receive you." Then, this isn't about fear, it's about formation. God is shaping you into a vessel of truth. And truth cannot dwell in spaces where performance is worshipped and compromise is defended. You were never meant to stay where your presence is tolerated, but your discernment is resisted. That's why you keep feeling the pull. That's why God keeps removing your peace from places you once loved. That's why the places you used to serve in now feel spiritually dead. It's not disloyalty, it's elevation. Your atmosphere is changing because your assignment is changing. And yes, it hurts. You feel the stretch, the distance, the loss. But you were not called to stay grounded in rooms that cannot steward your calling. God is upgrading your environment to match your identity. This is why the warfare has intensified, because you don't just enter a room, you shift it. You don't just sit in a circle, you discern it. You don't just walk through doors, you carry the power to shut them behind you. The next time you feel that tightening in your chest, the stillness that suddenly turns heavy, the friendliness that feels fake, the energy that suddenly shifts, listen. Don't doubt your discernment. Don't stay to be polite. Don't second-guess your knowing, because your spirit sees what your eyes cannot. Your presence disrupts what others accommodate. Your anointing agitates what others have agreed with. That's not something to apologize for. That's something to honor. God didn't give you the ability to sense so that you would ignore it. He gave it to you to move with it. The spirit within you doesn't lie. Trust it. Follow it. Obey it. Because every room you exit in obedience makes space for the divine rooms you were destined to enter. They're afraid. You'll say it out loud. They don't fear your silence, they fear your voice. Because the moment you open your mouth, the illusion starts breaking. The moment you speak what others sense but suppress, the power of deception begins to collapse. And that's why there's been pressure around your voice. That's why you've felt the weight to stay quiet. It's not because you have nothing to say, it's because what you carry threatens the structure of falsehoods. You were not just given sight, you were given language. You can articulate what others only feel. You can name what others ignore. You can say out loud what the spiritual realm hoped would stay buried. That is dangerous to darkness. There are atmospheres you've entered where everything was calm until you spoke. There were moments when the tension thickened, the second you named what no one else would dare confront. It wasn't your tone. It wasn't your attitude. It was your authority. Truth always creates friction where lies have taken root. Some people aren't offended by what you said. They're offended that you dared to say it. You've seen things others are too afraid to admit. You've called out motives that were hidden behind titles. You've challenged spiritual leaders, exposed manipulation, broken generational patterns, not with violence, but with clarity. And that clarity makes you a threat to everything built on pretense. That's why the enemy didn't just attack your identity, he attacked your confidence. He tried to make you doubt what you saw, then tried to shame you for speaking. He made you feel like your voice was too much, too intense, too controversial. But that wasn't you being reckless. That was truth being released. Because the most dangerous thing a chosen one can do is speak. When you say it out loud, you shift the atmosphere. You call things into accountability. You bring what's hidden into the light, and darkness cannot survive exposure. That's why your voice has always been under pressure. That's why you felt like you had to tone it down to be accepted. But here's the truth. God didn't give you revelation just for you to keep quiet. He didn't show you so much so you could politely agree with lies. What you see is meant to be spoken. What you discern is meant to be declared. Not for applause, not for argument, but for alignment. Because silence, when truth is needed, becomes agreement. And you were never meant to agree with the enemy's systems. You were born to dismantle them. And sometimes, all it takes is a voice that refuses to stay silent. It is written in the book of Proverbs, chapter 31, verse 8. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Oh, you are not just a watcher, you are a witness. You don't just perceive injustice, you are called to confront it. Your voice is not just for conversation, it is for correction. It is for truth. It is for spiritual freedom. That's why even when you tried to keep quiet, the fire still burned inside you. That's why your silence never felt peaceful. It felt suffocating. Because truth is not supposed to sit still inside a chosen one. It's meant to move, to convict, to restore. And yes, speaking costs you. It has cost you relationships. It has cost you approval. It has brought backlash and mockery. But your courage to say what others hide from is the very thing heaven celebrates. They're afraid you'll say it because once it's said, it can't be unseen. It can't be undone. It can't be ignored. The power of spoken truth is that it demands response. And your voice, anointed by God, carries that power. So remember this, the tension you feel around your voice isn't proof you're out of line, it's proof you're in position. Heaven is sharpening your tongue for spiritual surgery. The enemy knows one word from you aligned with God can collapse what he's spent years building. You are not called to whisper when the Spirit says, shout. You are not here to blend in when your voice was meant to stand out. And no matter how hard darkness tries to silence you, your truth will echo. Because you are not just one who sees, you are one who speaks. You've outgrown the lie. The version of you that once accepted the bare minimum, that stayed silent to keep the peace, that dimmed your light to fit in, that version is gone. It died in the wilderness. It wept through rejection. It broke in the fire. And now, here you are, clear-eyed, unshaken, and aware, because the lie no longer fits the size of your spirit. Chosen one, your awakening didn't just change how you see the world, it changed how you see yourself. You no longer believe the lie that you are too much. You no longer swallow the deception that you are being difficult. You no longer bend beneath the pressure to be small. Why? Because truth stretched you. And now that your spirit has expanded, the old container can't hold you. You've felt it, that internal friction, when people speak to the old you, expecting her to show up. That awkward moment when they assume you'll stay quiet, agree, or shrink back into who they remember. But you don't fit there anymore, because now you see it for what it is: spiritual manipulation, emotional control, environments that love the illusion of growth but reject the cost of truth. You were not created to stay loyal to falsehood just to make others feel secure. God has matured your sight, and with that maturity comes release. You've released false narratives. You've released spiritual codependency. You've released fear of judgment. And every release has made room for what's real. That's why some people can't recognize you anymore. They were only connected to your old identity, not your divine one. And though that process has been painful, it has also been sacred, because every lie you've outgrown was a trap meant to keep you spiritually small. The lie that said, "Stay quiet." No. The lie that said, "Don't challenge it." No. The lie that said, "Go along to keep the peace." No. The lie that said, "You're not qualified to speak." No. The lie that said, "You're too broken to be used." All of it false. All of it strategically placed to keep you bound. But the Spirit of God began to whisper what you already suspected. This isn't truth. And when that whisper became a roar, you left the lie behind. It is written in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 11. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. That's exactly what you've done. You've exposed lies not just around you, but within you. You've looked deception in the face and said, "No more." You've traded self-doubt for sacred confidence, guilt for clarity, spiritual slavery for freedom. That's why the enemy is afraid of you now. He isn't just afraid of what you believe. He's afraid of what you're becoming. Because a person who sees the truth is powerful, but a person who acts on it is unstoppable. That's who you are now. You're not just awakened, you're activated. You've moved from awareness into alignment, from surviving into building, from silence into sound. This shift didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, painfully, one betrayal at a time, one closed door at a time, one disappointment that led you back to God, and somewhere between the grief and the glory, you found your voice. You stopped begging people to see your heart. You stopped hoping shallow rooms would deepen. You stopped apologizing for the weight you carry. And now your feet are planted. Your heart is anchored. Your discernment is sharp. They tried to control you with confusion, but now you walk with certainty. They tried to limit you with fear, but now you live by revelation. They tried to exhaust you with false expectations, but now you're ruled by the Spirit. You've outgrown their boxes, their systems, their strategies, because the real you, the chosen you, is finally walking in the fullness of divine truth. and every step forward is a step out of the illusion. You don't need to explain this to everyone. Not everyone will understand. But you don't need agreement to be anointed. You don't need applause to be assigned. This clarity was costly. It cost you comfort. It cost you connection. But it bought you freedom. So if this section reaches the part of you that knows exactly what I'm talking about, if you felt the tearing away, the rising up, the holy unrest, then say it with boldness. Comment, I choose truth. Say it as a prophetic declaration, as a rejection of every false identity, as a closing of every counterfeit door. When you type those words, you're not just engaging a message, you're putting hell on notice. I've awakened, and I'm not going back. From this moment on, the lie has no home in you. Only fire, only truth, only glory. You don't just see the illusion, you disturb it. You walk into places and the atmosphere changes. Not because of what you say, but because of who you are. Your very presence carries clarity, and clarity confronts chaos. You carry a light that not only exposes, but unsettles. And this is why some people resist you, not because they truly dislike you, but because what you carry threatens what they're still clinging to. You weren't born to blend in. You weren't chosen to be subtle. You weren't saved to stay quiet. From the beginning, you were designed to interrupt darkness. You may not always feel strong. You may not always feel ready. But there is something in you that never lets deception sit comfortably. You don't let manipulation go unchecked. You don't let false peace pass as truth. You were born to pierce the fog, to call things what they are, to say what others are too bound to voice. And yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, it's misunderstood. But it's holy, because in a world obsessed with appearances, you were chosen to carry substance. In a world entertained by fantasy, you hunger for what's real. And even when your body gets tired, your spirit keeps waking up because the assignment on your life refuses to sleep. God placed you here to be a divine interruption. You don't follow the flow, you redirect it. You don't echo culture, you confront it. And you don't show up to please the crowd, you show up to obey the throne. That's why hell has fought your clarity so viciously. The enemy doesn't mind a believer who blends in. He's unbothered by churches that perform but don't transform. What he fears is the one who sees through the fog and speaks. What he fears is you. It is written in the book of Isaiah, chapter 60, verse 1. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. That rising, it's not just poetic, it's prophetic. You are not meant to live hidden. You are not meant to keep dimming down. You are not a side character in the story of faith. You are a fire carrier, a mantle bearer, a kingdom representative. The illusion can't hold under your gaze. That's why some rooms closed to you. That's why some people avoided you. It's not rejection, it's resistance to revelation. Because you've reached the point where even your silence speaks. Even your stillness disrupts. People can sense it without you saying a word. There's something different about you. Something weighty. Something sharp. Something sacred. That's not pride. That's not personality. That's the presence of God resting on you. And the more you step into it, the more you'll notice things shifting, environments reacting, conversations changing, people either drawing close or pulling away. That's not confusion. That's clarification. You are a walking revelation. You are a divine filter. You carry a frequency that heaven uses to expose what's not aligned. And when you show up, the masks tremble. That's why the enemy tried to break you before you knew who you were. That's why he targeted your confidence. Why he tried to convince you that you were too sensitive, too intense, too spiritual. It was all an effort to disarm your discernment. But what hell tried to silence, God is now amplifying. Because you don't just survive deception, you dismantle it. You don't just live in the truth, you release it. And now, more than ever, the world needs voices like yours to rise. Not performative voices, not popular ones, prophetic ones, holy ones, surrendered ones. And you, chosen one, carry that sound. So don't heed, don't hesitate, don't hold back. What's inside you is heaven approved and hell resisted. And that means it's needed now more than ever. If you feel this truth burning in your spirit, if every word of this message has echoed what you've quietly carried inside, then it's time to lean in even deeper. Like this message, to confirm what you already know. You're not alone. Share it with someone else who walks in quiet boldness, but feels the pressure to stay small. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Not just to follow more content, but to stay connected to a flow that speaks to your exact calling. Because this space isn't just for encouragement, it's for equipping. And what God is doing in your life needs to be nurtured, not neglected. This is not entertainment. This is alignment. You are not consuming a video, you are receiving a reminder from heaven. You were not placed on this earth to keep peace with lies. You were sent to break them open. You are the disruption the darkness didn't see coming. You are the answer someone else is waiting for. You are the echo of heaven in a world full of noise. And you don't just see through the illusion, you destroy it. No, you're not imagining it. The strange heaviness you feel in rooms others call safe. The spiritual tension in relationships that seem fine on paper. The sudden warfare that seems to rise the moment you get serious about obedience. These aren't moods. They aren't emotional overreactions. They are real. They are spiritual. And they are confirmation that you are becoming dangerous to the enemy. You've stepped into a level of awareness that exposes the undercurrent, those subtle forces working behind the scenes, manipulating, distracting, deceiving. Most people don't see it, but you do. You feel it before it manifests. You pick it up before there's any evidence. And that's not paranoia. That's discernment. You're not imagining that the air gets heavier when certain people enter the room. You're not imagining that your body tightens when you hear lies cloaked in spiritual language. You're not imagining that you feel drained after some conversations. Your spirit is catching what your mind is still unpacking. Because when you carry divine sight, you will feel the tension before others acknowledge the war. You'll see the danger while others laugh. You'll sense the compromise while others call it community. You'll feel the grief of the spirit where others only see strategy. That's the cost of vision. This is spiritual warfare, not just mental stress. It's not just that you're sensitive, it's that you're awakened. Your spirit is in a realm where everything is being tested. Every alliance, every conversation, every environment. You can no longer afford to be casual. You can no longer sit where you don't belong. The battle is intensifying not to break you, but to forge you. It is written in the book of 1 Peter, chapter 5, verse 8. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And when you start walking in purpose, the roar gets louder, because the enemy sees what's happening, even when others don't. He sees your steps becoming firm. He sees your voice growing stronger. He sees your appetite for truth increasing, and it threatens him. Because people like you don't just walk in freedom, you lead others into it. So what does he do? He tries to overwhelm you with confusion. He tries to twist your discernment into doubt. He tries to exhaust you emotionally, hoping you'll mislabel a spiritual attack as a personal issue. That's why everything feels louder, heavier, faster, because it is. You've stepped into a higher realm of influence, and with it comes higher resistance. But this isn't punishment, it's proof. You are not imagining the pressure. You are disrupting something in the spirit. You're not imagining the shift. You are initiating one. That's why it feels like the atmosphere itself changes around you. It's not your mind, it's your mantle. You don't just attend environments, you affect them. You don't just enter the room, you change it. You bring light into places darkness assumed it owned. You're feeling everything because you're carrying something holy. You've tried to downplay it, tried to stay normal, tried to silence what you sense. But it's too late for that now. The oil on your life is stirring things up. It's calling out what others would rather ignore. And you don't get to walk with that kind of power and stay unnoticed by darkness. But even in the pressure, there's purpose. Even in the tension, there's training. Even in the warfare, there is weight being added to your voice. Heaven is building endurance in you. You're not just being attacked, you're being anointed. Don't be surprised when the attacks feel more personal. It's because the enemy no longer sees you as a spectator, he sees you as a threat. You're not just imagining that things feel spiritually loud. That warfare is confirmation that you've stepped out of the crowd and into your calling. And though it feels unfamiliar, it's also undeniable. Something has shifted. You've changed. Your posture has changed. Your prayers have changed. Your tolerance for surface has disappeared. You're not easily swayed anymore. You don't crave the approval of the crowd, you crave the presence of the King. That's not a coincidence. That's what being chosen feels like. So, walk boldly, even through the spiritual static. You're not losing your grip, you're gaining your ground. You're not under attack because you're weak. You're under attack because you're walking in power. No, you're not imagining it. You're not unstable. You're not broken. You are awake. You are aligned. You are armed. And heaven is backing you every step of the way. This clarity you carry, it's not from this world. The reason you see through the fake, the reason you can't settle for surface, the reason your spirit feels off when something looks right, that's not just intuition. That's revelation. That's heaven whispering in real time. That's the Spirit of truth tuning your soul to a higher frequency. You didn't learn this clarity through textbooks. You didn't get it from sermons alone. You were formed in fire, shaped in silence, trained in spiritual storms where no one else could hear what you heard. You were taught by isolation, refined by heartbreak, and sharpened by obedience. And now, what flows from you is not opinion, it's evidence. Your discernment isn't borrowed. It's birthed from prayer, birthed from tears, birthed from seasons where you asked, God, is it just me? And he answered not with noise, but with sight. You see patterns others don't. You feel shifts others deny. You detect deception in places where people cheer. And sometimes that makes you question your own sanity. But you're not unstable. You're unmatched. Because what you carry is not just sensitivity, it's timely sensitivity. And that's the key. Your clarity is time sensitive. You are not just a discerner, you are a messenger, a revealer of what must be seen now, not later. Some warnings can't wait until next year. Some truths can't stay hidden another season. Some chains must be broken today. That's why you feel the urgency. That's why the pressure to speak, to move, to obey has intensified. It's not just spiritual, it's strategic. You are on heaven's clock now. And when God sharpens a chosen one, it's never for delay, it's for delivery. The Word of God declares in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 3, "For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hastens toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it will certainly come. It will not delay." You've entered that appointed time. This is why your eyes have been opened wider. This is why your dreams have felt heavier. This is why your discernment is clearer than ever. The veil is thinning, and you are one of the few God trusts to walk in that space between the seen and unseen. You've likely felt it, the unshakable pull to isolate, the growing discomfort around surface-level people, the frustration with environments that entertain but don't edify. That's not a random season. That's a summons. Heaven is calling you deeper. God is removing distractions not to punish you, but to position you. He's revealing truth not to overwhelm you, but to prepare you. And He's awakening urgency not to scare you, but to assign you. You weren't just called to notice what's wrong. You're called to intervene, to pray, to warn, to shift the atmosphere by your obedience, because some of the things God shows you are not just for awareness, they're for action. Yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's costly, but it's also holy. This is the hour where your clarity must become courage, where what you see must shape what you say, where what you feel must guide what you do. You can't afford to delay, because your voice may be the very thing that wakes someone up from spiritual death. And no, not everyone will listen, but the one who will, they're worth the obedience. You're not walking in this level of perception for entertainment. You're walking in it for impact, because God is using you like a key. And keys don't talk about doors, they open them. So if you've been feeling this weight, if you've been seeing more, feeling more, sensing more, then don't ignore it. Don't rationalize it away. Don't dismiss it because others don't see what you do. This isn't for the crowd. This is for the called. You are receiving divine downloads because the Spirit knows you'll steward them well. You won't twist it. You won't use it to manipulate. You'll walk it out in reverence and obedience. That's why you've been entrusted with this level of insight. So now, with everything in you, acknowledge this moment. Comment 555 below. That number represents grace for the assignment, a prophetic symbol that what God has given you, He will empower you to carry. When you type it, you're not just reacting to a message, you're aligning with the mantle. You're declaring, "Yes, Lord, I see it, and I will obey." End of true. This isn't just clarity. This is divine instruction. This isn't just insight. This is intercession. And you aren't just watching, You are responding. You are not afraid of what you see. You are responsible for it. You don't run from the vision. You move with it. Because the time is now. You're not rebellious, you're righteous. That word rebellious has followed you for years. Maybe not always spoken, but implied. They called it defiance when you questioned what didn't sit right. They called it disobedience when you refused to follow the crowd. You were labeled as hard to handle, hard to teach, hard to control, but they never stopped to ask, what if you were discerning? Not disobedient? From the beginning. Your spirit recoiled at what looked holy, but felt hollow. The moment someone spoke a polished lie, something inside you stirred. You didn't always have the language for it. You couldn't explain why you disagreed. But your heart knew. The spirit within you knew. And when you didn't conform, they called it rebellion. But it wasn't rebellion. It was alignment. You weren't resisting authority, you were resisting manipulation. You weren't hard-headed, you were spirit-led. And if no one has ever told you before, hear it now. Your refusal to submit to what was spiritually off was righteousness in disguise. You see, the world, and even religious culture, loves obedience, but only when it's convenient. They applaud submission, as long as it serves their structure, but you were never called to blind allegiance. You were called to holy obedience, and the two are not the same. You've stood in rooms where people celebrated systems that grieved the spirit. You've heard teachings that sounded good, but stripped people of freedom. You've been told to honor leadership, even when leadership led people away from truth. And when you asked questions, when you said, something's not right here, you were shunned. But God saw it all, and He wasn't disappointed in your resistance. He was proud of it, because in a time where many bowed to comfort, you stood for truth. In a generation addicted to appearance, you chased presence, and that meant walking a lonely path. But you didn't choose the easy road. You chose the narrow one. It is written in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7, verse 14, "But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." You found it, not because someone handed it to you, but because you refused to walk the wide road of spiritual conformity. You were drawn to depth, not performance, to prayer, not popularity. And though it cost you approval, it gained you anointing. The righteous path doesn't always look polite. It doesn't always look submissive. It often looks disruptive because it is. The Spirit of God doesn't flow through every structure, and when He doesn't, the righteous feel it. That's what's always made you different. You didn't follow orders just because someone quoted a verse. You followed the voice of the one who gave the word. You didn't worship culture. You followed the cloud. And that cloud has led you away from performance-driven religion and into intimacy-driven obedience. This isn't rebellion. This is righteousness refined by fire. You've said no when others said yes. You've walked away when others stayed seated. You've wrestled with convictions that others called too extreme. But righteousness doesn't need a crowd. It just needs a heart surrendered to the voice of God. And that's what you've done again and again. You chose to honor the whisper of the Spirit, even when it clashed with the expectations of man. That is what righteousness looks like in a generation of illusion, obedience in the face of opposition. You don't fit their mold because you were never supposed to. You don't think like them because your mind has been renewed. You don't walk like them because your path was carved in consecration. not convenience. Yes, it has cost you. You've been misunderstood, mocked, excluded. But every step you've taken in obedience has taken you deeper into truth. Every door you've walked away from has drawn you closer to glory. Every label they gave you has only confirmed what heaven already knew. You are not rebellious. You are righteous and set apart. So stop apologizing for your boundaries. Stop second-guessing your no's. Stop mourning the spaces that rejected you when you refused to compromise. That wasn't rejection, it was refinement. God was preserving your purity, protecting your clarity, honoring your hunger for what's real. Because righteousness always costs something, and you've paid that price not out of pride, but out of love. A love that refuses to fake peace. A love that chooses God over groupthink. A love that fears the Lord more than it fears being misunderstood. You weren't disobedient, you just couldn't follow the lie like the rest. And that's not rebellion. That's righteous resistance, and it's holy. Truth has always cost you something. You didn't ask for it. You didn't chase it for attention. It chased you. It found you. It whispered when everything else was silent. And once it came, it refused to leave you alone. You could no longer unsee what was revealed. You could no longer return to the shallow places. Because truth doesn't just enter quietly, it uproots. And when it came, everything began to shift. You lost people. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you changed for real. The conversations that used to entertain you became exhausting. The places that once felt safe became suffocating, and the people who once embraced you started growing distant, cold, even hostile, not because you wronged them, but because truth, when lived boldly, convicts those who cling to lies. And you've lived that. You've experienced the silent distance, the unexplained tension, the subtle withdrawal from people who once said they'd stand beside you, and deep down, you felt the weight of it all. You wondered if it was your fault, if maybe you should have stayed quiet, if maybe it would have been better not to say what you saw. But that's what truth does, it separates. The moment you began living in alignment, everything misaligned began to fall away. Not as punishment, but as purification. God was making room, removing access, cutting cords. Because where he was taking you, not everyone could follow. And though it felt like loss, it was actually the mercy of heaven at work. People you loved couldn't walk where you were called to go. Not because they were evil, but because they were comfortable. Comfortable with cycles, comfortable with shadows, comfortable with a form of godliness, but denying the power. And when your truth started shining light into those corners, they flinched. They didn't reject you. They rejected the mirror your life became. It is written in the book of Galatians, chapter 4, verse 16. Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? That question rings deep in your soul, doesn't it? You told the truth not to destroy, but to deliver. You spoke what God placed in your mouth, not to judge, but to warn. And instead of gratitude, you got resistance. Instead of unity, you got silence. Instead of support, you got slander. And yet you kept going. You kept walking the narrow way. You kept obeying the whispers of God. You kept standing firm when the temptation to shrink was loud, because in your soul, you knew truth is worth it, even if it costs comfort, even if it costs companionship, even if it costs everything. Because what you carry isn't a casual belief, it's a holy burden. and burdens are heavy, but they're also sacred. They are entrusted only to those who will not distort them, only to those who are willing to pay the price of being misunderstood. You've lost a lot, but you've gained more than they know. You've gained clarity, strength, vision, identity. You've gained peace that doesn't depend on who stays or who claps. You've gained authority that can't be bought, only born. And you've gained the intimacy of walking closely with the one who called you out. Because every time someone walked away, heaven drew closer. Every time someone shut the door, God opened another. Every time you felt alone, you discovered the one who never leaves. This is the cost of truth. It strips away what's fake to reveal what's eternal. And though it has hurt, though you've wept in silence and questioned the point of it all, look at you now, still standing, still discerning, still burning with a fire that this world can't put out. You've proven something the enemy hoped you'd never realize, that you are unshakable when you're anchored in truth. So, no, you didn't lose too much. You lost what wasn't meant to stay. You let go of hands that held you back. You walked away from circles that kept you small. You spoke up when silence would have been easier. You paid the price and heaven saw it all. The late nights, the lonely prayers, the battles no one clapped for, the sacrifices no one understood. Every single one was recorded, and not one was wasted, because God is not unjust. He doesn't forget those who choose him over comfort. And you, chosen one, have chosen well. So keep walking, keep speaking, keep carrying the truth, even when it costs you. Because what you've lost in the eyes of man has multiplied in the hands of God. Your clarity isn't just for you. You didn't go through all of that, the isolation, the rejection, the stripping just so you could be deep. No, it was for others. The pain you've endured was never wasted. The sight you've been given isn't just a gift, it's a weapon, a torch, a signal in the night for someone else who's still stumbling through darkness. You were chosen to carry light, not keep it hidden. Every truth you've discovered, every illusion you've broken through, every moment you chose obedience over comfort, those weren't just personal milestones. They were prophetic markers for someone else's deliverance. Someone needs what you carry. Someone's breakthrough is tied to your boldness. You don't just wake up for your own freedom. You wake up so others can follow the flame. And yes, that's weighty, but it's also sacred. Because not everyone will listen to sermons. Not everyone will read the Bible. But they will read you. Your walk, your silence, your shift, your transformation. And when they see you change, they'll start questioning their own chains. That's why the pressure has been so intense. The enemy isn't just trying to shut you down for your sake. He's terrified of who you'll awaken. It is written in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 11. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. And your testimony is no small thing. You've walked through fires you couldn't explain. You've discerned lies others defended. You've been branded difficult, too spiritual, too intense, all because your spirit refused to bow to false peace. And in every moment, heaven was sharpening your voice, not just to speak, but to deliver. The clarity in you is a call to arms, a wake-up cry to the ones who still think numbness is normal. It's not just revelation, it's revival. You weren't just called to understand, you were called to interrupt. You were sent to shake systems, Unsettle strongholds. Expose counterfeit peace and call sleepers out of spiritual coma. And even if your voice trembles, even if your steps are slow, you are still dangerous to darkness. This world doesn't need another echo. It needs your sound, the one forged in tears and fire, the one born of loss and revelation, the one shaped by the raw presence of God when no one else was looking. And make no mistake, the moment you open your mouth in obedience, hell loses ground. You've been refined for such a time as this. You've been hidden so that what God placed inside you could grow without contamination. And now is the season of release. So speak what God tells you. Move when He says, move. Post the word. Share the dream. Call out what feels off. Write the caption. Start the conversation. Be the voice someone else has been waiting to hear. And if this message has confirmed what's been stirring in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Like this word, if it met you right where you are, it's not about algorithms, it's about agreement. When you respond in faith, heaven takes notice. Share this message with someone you love, someone who's been quietly wrestling with everything you've survived. You never know what battle your boldness will break open for them. Comment below, I won't heed me light. Say it as a prophetic declaration, not just for this moment, but for every moment after. You've hidden long enough. You've second-guessed long enough. Now, you walk in full fire. And if this space has been feeding your spirit, if it's been confirmation after confirmation, subscribe, not to follow a trend, but to stay connected to what God is doing through this flow. This isn't just content, it's commission. Because God isn't raising up the loudest voices, He's raising up the clearest ones. Voices that carry presence, conviction, purity, surrender. Voices like yours. And maybe you've felt small. Maybe you've questioned whether it's worth it. But let this remind you, every time you obey, chains break. Every time you speak, clarity spreads. Every time you choose truth, another sleeper stirs. You are not just free, you are freedom walking. You are not just clear, you are clarity in motion. You are not just healed, you are healing released. So don't let fear keep you quiet. Don't let resistance keep you hidden. Don't let past rejection make you forget who you are. Your voice is needed. Your fire is rare. Your insight is holy. And the ones still asleep, they're waiting for you. The final veil is about to shatter. You can feel it, can't you? That deep, undeniable knowing that something is coming to a head. The tension between what's real and what's false is growing unbearable. The space between truth and performance, between conviction and compromise, is collapsing. What used to blend together can no longer coexist. The illusion is weakening. The veil is thinning, and soon it will break. This is not imagination. This is not just another shift. This is a divine rupture. You've seen it happening slowly, piece by piece. Masks falling, systems failing, voices once honored now exposed, lights once bright now dimmed by corruption. But where others see chaos, you see clarity. Because this isn't the destruction of truth, it's the destruction of everything that tried to mimic it. God is not revealing this to scare you. He's revealing it because He needs you prepared. Your vision isn't being sharpened for entertainment. It's being sharpened for warfare. Because when this final veil breaks, there will be no going back. What is hidden will be revealed. What is false will be made plain. What has lived in the shadow of religious performance will be exposed by the light of purity. And those who walk in truth, those like you, will be called to stand when others fall silent. This is why you've been feeling so pressed, so spiritually sensitive, so irritated by small talk and empty words. Your soul isn't restless for no reason. It's responding to what's breaking in the spirit. The veil that once muted the masses is coming down, and when it does, those who've lived in pretense will scatter, but those who've been forged in fire will rise. You are not being called into hiding, you are being called into readiness. The illusions are dying. The stage is cracking. The platforms built on ego and crowd-pleasing are collapsing. And you, chosen one, you have been set apart to lead in what comes next. Not with hype, not with perfection, but with holy clarity. It is written in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 4, verse 5. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. At that time, each will receive their praise from God. That's what's happening now. And God is using people like you to carry that light. You're not just called to witness the unveiling, you're called to walk through it, to stand steady when deception falls apart, to minister to those disoriented by exposure, to guide those who are waking up and wondering what's real. You won't do this from pride. You'll do it from compassion, because you remember what it felt like to wake up. You remember the disorientation, the ache of realizing you had built your life around partial truth. You remember how lonely it felt to walk away from systems that gave you identity but stripped you of freedom. And now, God will use you to hold space for the ones coming out. But make no mistake, not everyone will rejoice when the veil shatters. Some will mourn the illusion. Some will defend the mask. Some will rage against the light because it burns everything they've built. And when they do, you must stay planted. You don't owe an apology for walking in truth. You don't owe comfort to systems that chose image over integrity. You don't owe silence to those who demand it to protect their platforms. Your only allegiance is to the voice that woke you up in the dark and whispered, "Come out." Oh, and you did. You left the comfort of illusion. You abandoned the false safety of agreement. You chose purity over popularity. And now, your life carries weight. Not because you sought it, but because you surrendered. This final veil, it's not just cultural. It's spiritual. It's generational. It's ancestral. It is every system, every belief, every performance that stood between God's people and God's presence. And when it falls, everything will feel unfamiliar, but not to you. Because while others rehearsed the script, you prepared in secret. While others built platforms, you built altars. While others sought crowds, you cultivated consecration. And soon, the world will see what heaven already knows. The most dangerous voices are not the ones that shout the loudest, but the ones who never stopped listening. You didn't survive the wilderness for nothing. You didn't bury your tears for nothing. You didn't walk away from everything safe just to stand on the sidelines. You were called for this moment. The final veil is about to shatter, and when it does, the true ones will be revealed, not by title, not by fame, but by fire. What they fear you'll become, you're already becoming. They sensed it long before you did. That quiet strength, that holy defiance, that sharp discernment that refused to bow to illusion. They saw the spark and tried to smother it before it caught fire. They labeled you early not because they understood you, but because they recognized the threat. And you, chosen one, have grown into exactly what the darkness hoped you'd never become. A voice that exposes, a presence that unsettles, a spirit that cannot be bought or silenced. You're not just someone with insight. You're someone who breaks cycles, who tears down generational patterns, who walks into rooms carrying more than words. You carry disruption, not because you're angry, but because you're aligned. Not because you're trying to fight, but because you were born to confront what they feared is happening. You're walking in your mantle, not the version of you that second-guessed everything, not the you that begged to be understood, not the one that toned it down to stay included. That you is gone, buried, and from that death came this rising. And in this rising, you are not asking for permission. You are standing tall, eyes wide, heart clean, mouth ready. The enemy hoped you'd stay confused, that you'd drown in insecurity, that you'd sabotage your own calling before it had a chance to mature. But what he didn't anticipate was the fire that purified you, that refined you, that stripped away everything false until all that remained was the one thing he couldn't touch, your calling. And now, you're not just aware of it, you're walking in it. They feared you would see too clearly. You do. They feared you would speak too boldly. You are. They feared you would remember who you were. You have. And it is written in the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 19. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. 1. That revealing is now. You are part of a divine uprising, not loud in the world's way, but loud in the spirit, a quiet army of consecrated ones, set apart, marked by clarity, unshaken by chaos. And you are one of them, a remnant, a revealer, a torchbearer, a breaker. Heaven didn't choose you because you were perfect. Heaven chose you because you wouldn't bow. When everything in your life tried to make you quit, when betrayal cut deep, when silence felt heavy, when confusion clouded your path, you held on. And now, that grip has turned to strength. That endurance has turned to authority. That obedience has turned to fire. You've stopped defending yourself. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped begging people to see what God already declared. Because the more you step into who you are, the more you realize you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to interrupt. And you're not afraid anymore. Not of rejection. Not of judgment. Not of being too much. Because you've already lived through loss, through exile, through being misunderstood, and it only clarified your calling, what they feared you'd become, a force, a standardisé, a holy disruptor in a generation numbed by performance. You walk differently now. You speak from the Spirit. You discern without apology. You carry weight without striving. Because when you've been with God, you don't need approval, you carry presence. There's no going back to normal, no shrinking to fit in, no softening your edge to make others comfortable. You're not rude, you're not reckless, you're righteous. And your life now serves as a sign that God still marks people, that He still raises up the unknown ones, the wilderness ones, the unqualified ones, and sets them in places no man could have orchestrated. This is what they feared, that you'd become fully awake, that your voice would come alive, that your walk would align with heaven, that your eyes would pierce through systems, that your name would carry weight in the Spirit. And here you are, no longer echoing, no longer tiptoeing, no longer hiding. You've become the kind of believer hell pays attention to, the kind darkness can't distract, the kind the earth has been groaning for, not because of charisma, but because of consecration, not because of platform, but because of purity, not because of effort, but because of anointing. You are not just a seer, you are not just a discerner, you are a revealer of what others cannot see. And the moment you decided to walk in the fullness of who God made you to be, the moment you stopped apologizing for your fire, that was the moment everything changed. This is what they feared, and this is what heaven is now fueling. Chosen one. Take a breath. What you've just walked through is not just a message, it's a mirror, a reminder, a spiritual awakening, tailor-made for your journey. Because this was never about hype. It was about heaven reminding you who you are. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are chosen. You've been pulled out, set apart, refined, re-anchored for this moment, for this calling, for this hour. And the fire in your chest right now, that's not emotion, that's activation. That's destiny roaring back to life. Now, it's time to respond. Like this message, if your spirit felt the confirmation, if something shifted inside you as the truth unfolded word by word, share this message with the one person you know who's been quietly carrying a heavy calling, the one who's almost given up, the one who just needs someone to say, "You're not alone." Comment below with, "I'm chosen for this." 3 words, 1 declaration, a full surrender. Let heaven hear it from your own mouth. And if this entire journey has spoken to you, subscribe, not for more content, but for continued alignment, for messages that speak to the real you, the hidden you, the rising you, because we are building a space for the marked ones, the remnant, the disruptors, and you belong here. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are God's chosen one, and the world is about to find out why.